Welcome to the Progress Zone podcast, where we help you create real momentum in your mindset, business, health, and life. I'm your host, Jody Donaldson, and every week we'll explore the small, intentional steps that lead to big, lasting growth. This isn't about hype, it's about habits. So let's get started. Well, hey everyone, Jody here, and welcome back to the Progress Zone podcast. If you've ever felt called to make a big move, to step out of what's comfortable and into what's next, then today's conversation is going to resonate with you. My guest today is someone who embodies that kind of bold transition. Colin Whittington is a former law enforcement officer who left behind the badge to pursue a different kind of service, one that's rooted in building people, teams, and culture. He's now the CEO of Recruiting Heroes, LLC, a two-time best-selling author, and a passionate advocate for mission-driven leadership in the workplace. His story is one of values, vision, and reinvention, and today we're going to dive into all of it. From career pivots in entrepreneurship to writing books and building a personal brand with purpose, Colin brings clarity, courage, and a whole lot of insight to the table. Colin, welcome to the Progress Zone.
Hey, Jody, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about some great topics today.
Yeah, I'm excited too. This has been a long time coming, and we've known each other for several years and had some great conversations over the years. And it's just nice to have you on here to kind of talk through about your journey. And I know it's been great watching you and seeing all the things that are happening. And so, yeah, let's just jump right into it. For folks that don't know, you have a law enforcement background. Can you talk a little bit about where you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I knew from a young age I wanted to get into something where I would make a difference. I didn't want to sit behind a desk. I wanted to be out in the community and make a difference. And for a long time, I was trying to decide between the military and law enforcement. Ended up deciding to go the law enforcement route and joined the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, which is located in Northern Virginia, about 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. or so. So I was hired there in 2015 as a patrol deputy and spent several years on patrol, community policing. I was voluntold to become the agency's PIO, a public information officer, for about a year, which was a great experience. I learned a lot, didn't really love it, but it was still pretty fun. In 2019, I was named the Deputy of the Year for the whole state of Virginia, which was a huge honor for myself, of course, my family, and the agency. Shortly after that, I was promoted to sergeant and put in charge of the agency's background investigation and recruiting unit, which is where I really fell in love with the idea of recruiting and realized I had a passion and a skill for it as well. Like a lot of young officers today, after about 8 years, I started thinking about whether or not I wanted to stay in law enforcement. And it was, a real tough thing to come to grips over. I tried pushing down that feeling for about 8 to 10 months or so before really fully understanding that I think it's time to leave. I just, the financial part of it, the long hours, everything that you experience in law enforcement. I was there during COVID, during the George Floyd era. And it was just a lot of things all together that was kind of a perfect storm that kind of pushed me out of law enforcement. So I ended up going into the tech industry as a recruiter and pretty soon realized that I had, the entrepreneurial bug a little bit and had started getting messages from cops and veterans all across America asking for help and advice on how they can transition to the private sector as well. So I started my business, Recruiting Heroes, and it was supposed to be a side hustle forever, and it snowballed on me. But we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as well today.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, it's amazing background, and thank you for your service. I mean, I know it's also being in law enforcement, it's something special, and it's a bond that folks that have been in that field understand. It's a lifelong public servant, and the things that you do. When you did all those different positions within the agency, and then went to backgrounds, and you started seeing, was there I know you said you kind of been working it through your mind that there could be something outside of law enforcement. Was there something specific? Or was there a light switch that was like, okay, I'm ready now? Like what talk me through that process for you?
Yeah, honestly, it's a little, I have obviously no hard feelings against my agency or anybody there or the profession,
Sure.
But there's definitely just some frustration started first creeping in where I went from loving my job full-heartedly to all of a sudden realizing that there's frustrations. The governmental bureaucracy was huge. The fact that in law enforcement, like a lot of industries, the good performers often get rewarded with more work. So I was just getting more and more tasked with more and more. And in fact, the job that I was doing back in the sheriff's office is now being done by 4 different people, wow. which I'm proud of, knowing that I did so much. But at the same time, I think that had a factor to play as well. And then I just started realizing that I really enjoyed recruiting. I liked the idea of trying to bring people into whatever organization I was in. And I was, on LinkedIn, and I started getting messages from different recruiters in the private sector who started suggesting I come work for their company. And at first I said, no, I'm good. But then I started getting more of them. I was like, this is kind of interesting. Like, people actually seem to want me to come work there. And so I started at least looking into the idea of it. And I think that took hold of my brain a little bit and started developing more and more. And I realized, I'm 8 years in, I have to really, if I wanted to leave law enforcement, it should really be now. Like, once you get to the 12, 15 year mark, you're kind of, stuck. I call them like the pension handcuffs. You're kind of so far into your career that you don't want to leave, because you'll basically do your financial suicide to yourself. But at 8 years in, I thought, this is the time to do it. At the time, no child, and my wife and I were just, relatively newly married, and this is a good time to take a chance and go into a new career.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I think that transition though makes sense, because you're already working in that field. You're already making connections, in the recruiting world. When you went to that first company, what then, after you were there a little bit and started getting that entrepreneurial spirit and bug that you had, what was the inspiration behind starting Recruiting Heroes LLC, and, kind of walk through that process? Because I think, you got a little taste of it in the private sector, and we're working in it. What shifted to where you're like, hey, wait, I can do this, and this is who I want to work with, and the people I want to help, and the companies I want to work with? Kind of talk through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who knows me knows I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post on that platform far too much, but it's been honestly life-changing for me and my company and everything else. But during my transition, I started sharing the story about transitioning out of law enforcement, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I started getting, like I mentioned earlier, a few messages from veterans and cops asking for help. And it really started off with just, advice here, a little bit of resume advice here, actually interview training here. And that just kept snowballing, where the people I was helping, they would refer 4 or 5 friends each to me, and it started getting more and more and more. So it was pretty wild. So that was one factor. And then the other, I ended up actually joining a company that I didn't really align with morally and ethically. The leader wasn't a really good person. But I was working for them as a recruiting director. And there was a day where I was actually one of the things this company does was help other companies with their recruiting efforts.
Right.
And I was in line to vote one day, and I struck up a conversation with a guy in line who also was an executive for a recruit company, a tech company in Northern Virginia, and told me he needed help recruiting for this high level role. So I told him what I did, and we ended up, deciding to work together. So I brought him into the company, signed a contract with his company, and then I went out and found the candidate that he wanted to hire, and eventually did hire. And I made my company I think it was like $35,000. And my recruiting bonus for that was $500.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it wasn't like it was a role that my company, my company didn't give me this role and tell me to work on it. Like, it wasn't anything they nurture. I literally found the client, signed the client, found the candidate, placed the candidate, and I got, what is that? 0.5% of all of the revenue. So then I started thinking, like, man, that was easy. I could do this myself, So when I started my business as a side hustle, part of my business was working with candidates, which is what I love. The other half was helping companies that want to help recruit and hire veterans and first responders. And that just really took off. It was, companies were so interested in what I was doing. Recruiting is a very saturated industry. So there's a ton of companies that do recruiting like that. But my mission to help hire veterans and first responders really struck a lot of these companies. And so many of them came back to me and said, hey, we usually don't work with recruiting companies, but because of your mission and what you want to do, we would love to work together. And then that part of the business just completely snowballed on me and took off. And in the first year, I probably made, 5 or 6 times the highest salary I ever had in my life, which was really cool and very, very exciting, and helped grow the other parts of the business as well.
Did you get support when you said, oh, you're going to go do this on your own, or even when you left the police department? Were folks kind of like supportive, like, hey, good for you for doing this? Or were people a little bit like, what are you doing? You're leaving a good government job. Like, did you get any of that type of, like, what type of support did you have from your family, your friends, that type of?
Yeah, I would say family and friends were very supportive and very much like, hey, you're the right person to do this. You have the right personality. You'll do really well. But the people I only knew like through work or vaguely knew, command staff, they thought I was crazy. And they told me that too. Like, you're leaving law enforcement. That's a great career, safety, whatever else. And like, they thought it was a dumb mistake, and they're trying to convince me to stay. And I think that taught me a lot. It's like, I think law enforcement is an amazing career. I loved my 8 years there, and a lot of people will have very happy 20, 30-year long careers. But I talked to a ton of candidates now who are at the same mark as I was, 8 years in, 10 years in, and trying to figure out whether or not they want to stay or not. And the big thing I always tell them is, like, listen, I am never going to convince you to stay or to leave. That has to be your choice. But I want you to know that there is so much potential for you out there in the private sector if you want to leave. There's potential to stay in the agency as well and do very well in law enforcement. But don't let anyone tell you a cop can't do well in the private sector, because I'm living proof that that's complete BS. You can go out there and do whatever you want to do. You don't have to necessarily become a CEO or an author, but you can go out there and do really well as an employee and just crush it in the private sector, make way more money, have better work-life balance, and just also have more fulfillment too, potentially. So I think seeing that response from the people I didn't really know very well, and seeing what they were saying fueled my fire a little bit to prove them wrong. And now it fuels me to help other officers who are considering the career transition to know that they can do very well in the private sector as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think a couple of things. I think most people, it's their fear, right? Like, oh my God, it's like, what's going, or maybe a little jealousy too. Like, he's getting out because so many people feel stuck. And that's a shame that that's the case, because like you said, you love the work, you love the squad, the people you worked with, the mission, but it does really, it's a limiting mindset on a lot of things because it's so structured, right? It's paramilitaristic, like it's government, like you can be creative and kind of do some things within a box, but it also, folks that might want to try something else or don't have the education or training or skill set feel like they can't get out. But the one thing that's amazing that I think has really parlayed into recruiting heroes and what you've done is that the skill sets that we have in law enforcement, that equates to so much stuff in the private sector. It might not look the same. Report writing, is what we call it in law enforcement. It might be something else. It might be, comms plan or something special, in the private sector. It might be, project management in the private sector, but it's a case management, in the law enforcement. And so I think that's where probably you've been a huge resource to so many folks to say, what have you done in law enforcement? Now, how can we make this to where it, equates to the private sector? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And it's been really interesting for me to see, because so many officers come to me and have no clue what they can do next or what they want to do next. Now, a lot of them feel very confined to being in a security or an investigative type of industry in the private sector. And I always ask them, like, do you want to do that? And some people say, yeah, I love this kind of stuff. I want to keep doing it. But most of them, like, no, I don't really want to do it. I just feel like that's all I can do. And those are the ones I pounce on and say, that's absolutely false. You can do anything you want in the private sector. And the big thing is just articulating your skill set. Like you said, so many cops, we work with cops. Some of us marry cops. Our friends are cops. So we talk a certain way and we present ourselves in a certain way. And that way of communicating isn't going to do you much justice when you go to try to articulate that skill set to the private sector. And that's a big thing that I work on with my candidates, is really how to articulate what you've done and how it actually translates very well to the private sector and specifically the job that you're trying to apply to. And you mentioned, some examples. I use the same thing with, when you're an FTO or field training officer, you're training and mentoring a new employee. Even though we don't use this term in law enforcement, you were a project manager at the time, even so you can be a leader even without having the official supervisor rank. And that's a big thing I always try to push them, is highlight those skills, highlight the things that you've done and highlight how they can correlate to the private sector.
Yeah. And there's so many of it. Like it literally is just a different shell of what the work is. The work's the same. It just might look different because there's different mechanisms and tools that we use in law enforcement, right? But it's exactly the same. Plus, you have folks that have gone through a significant hiring process, right? So they're vetted, they have clean backgrounds, they're quality workers, they're loyal, they're so you get a good characterization of a potential employee that I think a lot of employers would love to have. And it's the same for the military. I think it's very similar, right? Like a lot of folks that probably work with your company that transition from the military as well, just making sure that you can line up their skill set, experience, training, everything to reflect that in the resume, on the profiles, whatever else for the employer.
You mentioned loyalty and stuff too. Right now in the private sector, job hopping is such a huge problem companies are experiencing. Candidates are doing it because when they jump to another company, they get a bigger raise. Instead of, if they stay, they get a 3% raise. If they switch jobs, they get a 10% raise. So it makes sense. But companies, obviously, recruiting is a massive expense. It's like I mentioned before, the fee that we charged that one company to find one candidate was like $30-some thousand. And imagine that candidate stays for 1 year and then leaves. They have that same fee again, all over again. So the fact that you've been with your organization or law enforcement or military for 10 years or whatever it is, they're going to love to see that. The fact that you've actually been loyal to one organization, and you're not just going to come in there, learn something, and then leave 6 months later. So I think that's a huge thing as well. But there are companies out there that want to hire what you have to offer. And I think my company is a huge example of that. Like I said, recruiting is a super saturated industry. There are thousands of companies that do what I do in the US, in India, and other places as well. But they just do generic recruiting, right? I am very specific in military and law enforcement. And again, that phrase, when I pitch my company to companies, that's what they jump on. Like, oh, you actually we can get us cops or veterans? Like, I'd love to talk to you. That's exactly what we want. So it's pretty amazing to see, because I have friends who have started their own recruiting companies too, but they're more, general. They just recruit any candidate, and they are struggling to get any kind of business. So it's cool to see.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about too, like the types of positions too? Because I think some people get kind of like, I don't even know what that would look like. What type of positions could I apply for? So the companies that you are working with, or the candidates you're working with, can you talk a little bit about kind of what kind of jobs they could go into, what type of fields, things like that? Because I think that'd be super helpful for folks that might be in this position that are looking to get out. Before they reach out to you, maybe, give them an idea of what it would look like.
Yeah, I think I was very similar to a lot of cops, where I thought the only companies that would want to work with me are ones that are investigations or security. And while we absolutely do have clients that are in those fields, we have placed candidates in almost every single industry you can think of. I put cops into recruiting. I've put people into sales. Sales is a huge one for law enforcement, because the young generation right now that has grown up behind their screens and their phones, they can't talk for crap. I literally saw an online course, about a month ago. And the course was about how to answer a cell phone, or how to answer a call. I'm sorry, how to answer a call.
Oh,
because
wow.
the Gen Zers, they've just texted, and the course was saying, like, do you have anxiety about answering a phone call? And that's a real thing. Like, they literally have anxiety about getting on a phone call. But us in law enforcement, we have had to communicate pretty much every single day. And our ability to communicate could be the difference between a violent call or, de-escalating a situation. And that ability is huge in the private sector as well. So companies love to hire cops, especially for sales roles, because of your ability to build rapport and build connections. Customer success managers are really popular as well, especially with companies like Axon, Flock Safety, NeoGov, or any company that has like a public safety division. Because what happens is, let's say Axon has a body camera contract with the NYPD. They will want to have a customer success manager who isn't in sales. This person is literally this person's role is to build or maintain relationships with their current clients. So Axon would literally have this one person, or for a big contract, numerous people, be the point of contact with the NYPD or whatever agency it is. And what they like to do is hire cops for these roles, because us in law enforcement, as you know as well, we're pretty mistrusting of outsiders, right? We're not going to, if some random civilian says, hey, I've never been a cop before, but this body camera is great, we'll be like, yeah, get lost. But if I come in there and say, hey, I wore this in myself, or I've been in your shoes, I've done this, agencies are going to be far more trusting of that person, and will actually know this person knows what he's talking about. He gets what we're looking for. So those are very popular right now as well as customer success managers. But there's so many. Like I said, project management's been huge. Even healthcare. You name it. It's all about, again, articulating your skill set and putting yourself in a position where you can really be successful in the private sector. And one of the biggest mistakes I see cops make is waiting far too long to start the process of planning for their transition.
Right. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it's almost daily. I talk to a cop who's either already retired or is retiring in the next, month, and is now scrambling, trying to figure out what they want to do next. And they put themselves in a real bind because this job market, it sucks. Just being honest, this job market sucks right now. Yeah. So if you're considering transitioning to a new career, start the process as early as you can. Honestly, 3 or 4 years in advance. Start planning it, because you can start making yourself a more competitive candidate in those last handful of years.
Yep. And that's a perfect example to work with someone like you, right? To help get them on that track. Also start building that profile, right? On LinkedIn and wherever else they need to be. Also making those connections, right? If you're especially if you're in a specialty position. Now, if you've been a road dog and, pushing a cruiser a whole career, there's some things, that you probably have to really work out of their skill set to show that. But like, if you're in a specialty, you working with private sector firms all the time on different things, whether it's investigations or, certain all the tools that you talked about, like Axon and all the other, companies, Motorola and all the other big ones that, work with them. So I think that's interesting. And I think folks, there is a bigger opportunity that they could fall into with that.
For sure. Honestly, I say it all the time that who you know is almost always more important than what you know. And that's never been more true than right now in the current private job market. It's just very competitive. And most people who are landing jobs are doing it at least partially because of who they know, and they're able to get their resume, their name in front of the right person. So I tell officers all the time, if you go to a training across the country or to go to a conference, start networking with obviously private sector people, but also fellow officers, because you never know. Like, you may meet a cop at a conference, and then 5 years later, that person is running a program in the private sector. And you can later on, when you go to apply, say, hey, we met at conference X, Y, or Z in Arizona or wherever. And just that personal connection can get you in front of the right person. So building relationships, building connections is so vitally important. Of course, the resumes and LinkedIn parts, all super important as well. But that actual connection is going to be huge for you, especially as the job market gets more challenging in the future. Who knows what the future looks like with AI and robotics and things like that. It's very possible the job market will shrink as far as open positions, and you will have to use your network to land opportunities, because right now, on average, every job opening in America is receiving around 250 applications.
Wow.
That's the average right now. That's a study from last year. Said an average is 250 applications for one opening. So if you go to apply for a role, you're competing against 249 other candidates. So all the time, cops come to me and say, hey, I applied for this job. I have all the qualifications, everything they're looking for I have. Why didn't I get a call? There's probably 20 other people that have just the same skills, if not more. And they're articulating it better on their resumes and interviews and things like that as well. So nowadays, just meeting the qualifications is no longer enough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, all this information that you have shared just within Recruiting Heroes, I mean, you've also written 2 books. That's no small feat in itself. So kind of talk to me about like what made you decide to become an author and share a little bit about each book, because I know they have a little different audiences, but I think
they're honestly very, very different audiences for sure. But they've really tied 2 of my real passions together. So the first one was last year. I started realizing I was having the same conversations pretty consistently with officers, and just realizing that there's only so many hours in a day that I can actually help officers. The country, I think we currently have 800,000 to 1 million officers, law enforcement, whether it be local, state, or federal. And I knew I could never help every single one of them by just having a conversation like this. So I started writing down the things that I was, helping people with. And some of it turned into like social media posts or blog posts, but it started becoming more and more of a bigger product. I started realizing, and then I was honestly halfway done it before I realized I was writing a book. It was just me writing down ideas. So it ended up becoming my first book, which is called Beyond the Simple Line. So this is it right here. And it came out last July. So about a year ago. Last week was a year ago, actually. You got your one too, I'm sure. There we go. I love it. I need
it signed, by the way.
Okay, we got to meet up and get it signed for you for sure. So I self-published it, which is, if anyone thinking about writing a book, self-publishing is 100% the way to go, unless you're someone famous or get very lucky with a publishing deal. Self-publishing through Amazon and a few other places is very easy. But the book is all about basically what we're talking about now is how to transition from law enforcement to the private sector. I cover the initial things like how to even figure out what you want to do next, what industries are out there. Then I dive into things like resume writing, cover letters, LinkedIn, interview training, and a few other things. And I've read so many books that I thought were very generic, right? Very just general, like nothing specific. And for anyone who's read the book, they probably can tell that the book is there's very little fluff in it, which is also why it's a pretty short book. It's not a huge book, but every single sentence I try to be very actionable, where I literally say, do this, click this button, put this here, to really make it as easy as I can for officers. Because I knew my audience as well. Cops usually aren't the biggest readers. So I figured that would be a good thing. But it became a bestseller on Amazon, and it's sold now, I think, in over like 19 countries, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
For whatever reason, Australia loves it. It's after the US, of course, is the best-selling country by like a huge margin, which is pretty cool. But I've gotten messages from cops in Australia, Brazil, England, Ireland, all over the country, over the world, who've read it and really been inspired by it. And it's been really cool to see. The book was picked up by an organization in Ireland that helps law enforcement transition as well, similar to Recruiting Heroes. And they invited me to come to Ireland to speak. So I went and spoke at a conference there. So it's literally been a book that's changed my life, which has been really, really cool. And just been very blessed. It still sells copies all the time, which is pretty cool. And brings business to my company too, which is great. Both from candidates as well as companies too, which is really cool.
Yeah. It tells you that there was an audience that it resonated with, right? Like and worldwide, not just in the US here, right? Like this is something that I think everybody talks about. If you've been in like military or, law enforcement, this is a thing. Like it's resonated with people because people are interested in, is there another way? Than working all the holidays and nights and midnights and, all the things that you sacrifice in that role. Not that it's bad. Thank God everybody, we need it. And I love the folks that have done a career out of it and done it. But, for folks that do feel like they want something different, there is opportunity. So then what's the second book?
Yeah. So the second book is called The Thinning Blue Line. So this is the complete opposite. As I mentioned, I had spent about 3 years in background investigations and recruiting. And while I was in the position during the COVID crisis and George Floyd era, and most agencies during that year or 2 years, like this struggle with recruiting, right? The vacancies skyrocketed and they just really, really struggled. My agency with my team, we got our vacancies to our lowest rate ever. It was like 2% vacancies. And it was because we did some really innovative things. And I look around and I still don't see agencies doing it. So I wrote a book about how to recruit and how to retain officers. So this one's called The Thinning Blue Line, which is, I think, pretty telling. A lot of people leaving law enforcement right now, as you can see, the guys disappearing. And I see it in my daily work now too. When I started my company, I assumed that I'd be working with primarily retiring officers. Right. But 60% of the candidates I work with have less than 12 years of law enforcement experience. Wow. 60% are leaving law enforcement early. And almost all of them tell me the same thing, that they never thought they'd leave law enforcement when they did. And it was just few small decisions, usually from the leadership, that caused them to leave. And very few of them pointed to the money or even the long hours. A lot of them pointed to the way they were treated by their command staff and their agencies, lack of respect, lack of upward mobility, and lack of having a voice in the agency. So the book is partially about recruiting, where I talk about something crazy, using LinkedIn to recruit, which for some odd reason, law enforcement agencies do not use LinkedIn, even though it's the biggest professional networking platform in the world. It's absolutely crazy to me. I see nobody on LinkedIn. I created my agency's LinkedIn profile, a company page when I was there, ran it for 2.5 years. By the time I left, about 55% of our applications were coming to us through LinkedIn. Wow. 55%. That was 2 years, only 2 years of me working on it. That's it. And again, most agencies aren't using it. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, which is fine, but no one's on Instagram looking for a job. People are on LinkedIn looking for a job. And again, it's a free platform and agencies aren't using it, which is bizarre. That's a whole nother, can go down a rabbit hole with that one.
So to get you fired up on that, yeah.
It does. It's crazy. It's really bizarre. But there's other techniques as well. And then there's the retention part of it. It's nothing earth-shattering in my book by any means, but it's just very simple things. Treat your people well. Give them a reason to stay. It's wild to me. I think this current leadership in law enforcement they got into law enforcement in the 90s and early 2000s, back when it was very competitive to become a cop. You know, agencies had people lined up down the street for a single position. So agencies were able to treat their officers like a number. This younger generation, which is the Gen Zers and millennials, I don't know if millennials are even young anymore, but this younger generation, they're not putting up with this anymore. And we're seeing that in the private sector as well as in law enforcement, where if they're not getting treated well, they say, screw this, I'm leaving. And that's why I'm getting 60% of my clients are coming or leaving law enforcement after only 5 to 10 years or so. And it's because agencies aren't giving them a reason to stay. And they're using this, they're treating the people the same way as they did, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, and it's not going to work. You know, I got one negative review on Amazon for this book and talking about how it's just all very basic stuff. I'm like, it's basic stuff, but no one's doing it. Like, people aren't doing it. I hear all the time that leadership is just moving people around for no reason. They just one day got a call, hey, you're going to midnights in the jail for no explanation, no nothing. And it's just like simply explaining your decisions or making people feel they have a say in the agency, even if it's just like at a low level. Small things like that make a huge difference, but agencies aren't doing it right now. And it's no wonder why law enforcement can't recruit right now. I think agencies are shocked, but I'm not shocked at all. It's very obvious. And until they address the obvious things, it's going to stay that way forever.
Yeah, that's such a shame, man. It's some amazing people that work in that field. And you're right. Just take care of your people, treat them right. Be transparent internally. I know a lot of times too, like there's decisions are made at some higher level leadership and no discussions, no input from frontline staff and patrol officers. And it's really frustrating. So
we're losing really good people. We're losing great people. Like, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I went from being, the deputy of the year for the whole state, and then within 2 years had left law enforcement.
Right.
That shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. Not to pat myself on the back. That shouldn't happen to anybody. Any officer who has obviously done something right to get that award, agencies should have fought to keep him. And honestly, I thought my agency did very little to try to keep me. And again, I still love the agency. I go back all the time and visit them. But at the same time, this is the story. My story is the same one that's being repeated all over the country, unfortunately.
Yes. And that is such a shame. Well, tell me, I know you're working on a new project. Can you talk a little bit about this academy?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one's going to be coming out in the next month or so, and it's called the Heroes Academy. And It's basically, in simple terms, it's an online course, but it's really more than that. It's a transformational system where people will be able to come into this program or our academy and learn everything that I know about the transition from law enforcement to the private sector. So while the book is a lot of information, it's still a book. You still have to read it. You don't actually get to see me face to face. This academy is going to have me front and center telling you exactly what to do, giving you guides, giving you resources, downloadables, audio versions, video versions, anything you could possibly need to be successful in the private sector. And then there's also going to be a private community as well, away from LinkedIn, which is still great, but it's going to be a private community where I'll have weekly calls just like this, covering a topic. There's going to be another weekly call where you can, it's going to be this guy called the office hours, where you can ask any question you have. If you have a question on resume writing, if you have a question on interviewing, I'll be there as a resource. I'll also be bringing in recruiters and hiring managers to post their open roles that they want to hire cops or veterans for. And It's just going to be awesome. And at the very end, if you graduate the academy, you get one of our challenge coins, which is the Heroes Academy.
Oh, I love that.
Coin. And this coin, people have asked me for it already. I will never sell it, and I will never give it to anybody. Even my wife isn't going to get one. These are literally only if you graduate the academy. So it's going to be something kind of cool that's special for the people who graduated. I've been working on it for almost a year now. It's been a lot of work. It's really, really cool. I'm really excited for it. I was hoping to have it out in July, but it's probably gonna be August now. But I've really noticed that military does a decent job helping their people transition. They have their transition assistance programs or TAPS. Law enforcement agencies especially are actively trying to prevent their people from leaving. Yeah. I have a 4-hour course where I go to agencies and teach on the process of transitioning. And I've had, some agencies say yes. I've been to Las Vegas MPD. I've been to Charlotte. So 2 massive agencies and a few other ones as well. But 9 to 9.5 out of 10 agencies tell me to get lost when I present the idea of coming to their agency, even to teach for free. And they don't say they don't trust me. They say, we don't want you teaching our officers these skills.
Yeah. We don't want them leaving. Yeah. Yeah.
And I say, okay, that's all right. But how about you make it just open to the ones who are retiring this year? Nope.
Right.
And then my response, I think respectfully, maybe it doesn't come across as respectfully as I think it does, but respectfully, I say, rightfully so, officer wellness has become a bigger topic in the last year or two, right? Or not, the last 10 years, I'm sorry, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But can an agency say they care about their officers if they don't give a crap what happens to them once they leave? If you only care about someone while they're filling a need or filling a need for you, basically, if they're doing something that benefits you and you care about them then, but as soon as that need is no longer being met by that person, you stop caring. In my opinion, you never actually cared about them. It's the right thing and the politically right thing to say is that you care about your officers, but do you really? And I usually get a lot of silence back on the phone when I talk to someone like that. But it always hits me powerful.
That's super powerful though. But it's true, right? Like, I mean, you do especially you do a whole career there, and you're not going to prepare your folks to transition to whatever it is. And provide the support, take care of them. And, officer wellness is a thing, but there's mental health awareness. There's other emotional, wellness that they could take care of to help protect folks, make sure that they transition, because also that is a transition, right? It's a very different environment if they do last a whole career and then go into private sector. And, there is a statistic, I think, and I don't know it off the exact number, so I'll probably botch it, but, there's folks that have done a full career in law enforcement, if they don't have any other interest or outside friends, outside of the law enforcement community, they die within like the first 5 years. Like it's like a major thing, right? They don't know how to transition into just being a normal citizen type role, right? Like I think, and they lose that sense of, what they stood for, what they did for so long that, there's a whole component of what work life after law enforcement does to people. And they, like you said, they're dying either from natural causes, but also suicide is incredibly high amongst officers who have just retired or left law enforcement within the last couple of years. So I started realizing that, agencies were actively trying to prevent this subject from being taught. So I said, pardon my French, but screw it. If agencies won't do it, I'm going to go directly to the officer. And that's what this academy offers. Unfortunately, again, I mentioned before, like the book, there's only so many hours in the day. And I've gotten, so much outreach from people wanting my help that, I can't possibly train every single officer. And this just makes it very accessible. People can sign on when they have time. It could be 2 a.m. in their cruiser. They can listen to the academy. And they have lifetime access. So even if they use it now, get a job in the private sector, and 5 years down the road, they say, oh crap, I need to find another job. The academy is still available to them, and they can still go in there and go through the materials again. And there'll always be updates and things too. So it was really all about trying to get directly to the officers and kind of bypass the agencies, which, I gave them a year to make more of an effort to train their people, and they didn't take it. So then now it's going right to the officers. And I'm very excited. I think it'll be really beneficial to a lot of people. Yeah, I think so too. It already has shown to be that case, and there is a need. And so, but I got to tell you too, like, you've done so much since you've left law enforcement, writing the books, doing the academy, speaking, doing trainings. Part of this podcast too is like mindset and progress. The progress zone is based off how are we progressing to be better tomorrow than we are today, and just constantly learning and always be, trying to be better, for ourselves, for our family, for our friends, just show up better. How do you keep going? Like, what's your mindset that helps you keep going, even when it's uncertain, right? So leaving the police department, that was uncertain. Leaving the tech company to start your own. What do you do, and how does your mindset work to help keep you going in those transitions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where a lot of people fall short is they look at the whole big thing, the task they're trying to accomplish, whether it be write a book, start a company, start an online program, whatever. And it gets so overwhelming that they just shut down and say, oh, I just not worth all the effort. I can't possibly do it.
Right.
What I really focus on is every single day, no matter how busy I am, I spend half an hour working on something that inspires me, whether it be writing the book, starting this academy, whatever it is, every single day, to spend 30 minutes working on something. It can be reading a book even. Like if you're reading a book on whatever topic really interests you, or working towards a certification or anything else, spend 30 minutes a day working towards something that makes your life better, or your family's life better, because those minutes compound on each other in incredible ways. I was running my business full time when I was writing my first book, and I was literally working on it maybe 45 minutes a day. And within, a handful of months, the book was done, because it really, again, it compounds on itself. So don't let the big thing scare the crap out of you to basically freeze you from any kind of action. Take small steps every single day. And it's amazing how far you can come in a very short amount of time. And that's what I've done. It's when I look back in the last 2.5 years, how much I've done, it seems like insane and impossible, but it really was just done at, 45-minute increments, where every single day I put time towards it. And I think in law enforcement, we as a profession and as individuals, we get so consumed with being in law enforcement. We put our whole heart and soul into it, which is great. Keep being the amazing officer that you are. But we can't be so invested in our career that we forget to think about what we ourselves want as well, whether it be family, whether it be life outside of law enforcement, career outside of law enforcement. So take the extra time to work towards whatever brings you fulfillment and passion, because it's what I've really strived to do every single day, and it's been amazing. And it's hard, some days I'm working, all day long with family, whatever else, and it's 10 p.m. It's like, crap, I didn't do my 30 minutes yet. So then I go do my 30 minutes at 10 p.m. Or, sometimes I'm really, really good and I do it very first thing in the morning. But every day, half an hour towards whatever it is. At least you can do more if you have more time, of course. But that's really what I've been doing.
Right. Well, you just mentioned it too, but what do you do when you're having a bad day? Or you get some rejection from a company, or you get a bad book review? How do you deal with some of that? In the mindset and your internal workings to get through something like that? Because it is hard. You put yourself out there. You're building a brand. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I get negative stuff all the time, whether it be book reviews, which are not very, most of them are positive. Now and then a bad one will come through. But I make YouTube videos all the time, and there's always anti-law enforcement people on there talking crap, whatever else. I always just think, someone's going to hate what you do no matter what. If you want everyone to love you, you basically have to live in a box in your house and never go outside, basically. Because if you do anything worthwhile in life, there's going to be haters out there. And I try to ignore the one person who hates me or doesn't like what I'm doing and focus on the 99 people that are, whose lives I've helped change and help find careers. And those are the ones I care about. The ones who dislike you, they'll hate you regardless, right? They're not going to be happy with what you do, no matter what you do. You could go save a child from drowning in a lake, and they'll say, "Oh, you only did that for this reason or this reason." There's going to be people you can't please, no matter what you do. And don't focus on them. Focus on the ones you're making a difference for, including your family, and then focus on what you think is your purpose in this life. Because I think we all have a purpose, no matter what that is. And for some people, it might just be the best spouse or the best parent or the best sibling. You don't have to start a business by any means. I think starting a business is a cool way to live your life, but that doesn't have to be what you do, because not everyone is built for running a business. But whatever your purpose is, figure out what that is and then go towards it. And as long as you're not getting in the way of someone else's purpose, you're going to do great in life. That's the thing. Live the best life you can and go after what you want to do. That's what I would say for sure.
I love it, man. I love it. And that's exactly what it's about, right? Focus on the positive, be grateful every day for opportunities and what you have. I'm sure people, I know Recruiting Heroes, you're on several platforms, LinkedIn. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you if they want to get the academy, if they want to get your book? Tell us where they can find you and where you like to connect with folks.
For sure. So the website for Recruiting Heroes is recruitingheroesllc.com. So when I went to buy the domain, recruitingheroes.com was purchased by some company that resells them. And at the time they wanted like $5,000 for the domain. So I'm going to eventually pay for it. But right now it's recruitingheroesllc.com. But we're also on LinkedIn is the main social media platform we're on. That's Recruiting Heroes as well. I personally use LinkedIn all the time, and I love connecting with people who are, driven and want to do well in their next career. So find me on LinkedIn, just Colin Whittington. But you can also email me from the Recruiting Heroes website, or it's colin.whittington@recruitingheroesllc.com. And on there, you can read all about the services we offer, the academy. Right now, you can join the academy, and you can become a founding member and save 20% once it comes out later in probably August of this year. So yeah, reach out. I honestly, I answer every email personally. Like I said, so far, I just love doing what I do and don't want to hand the reins off to anybody else. So I literally answer every email we get, and it's been a lot of fun. So feel free to reach out at any point in time.
Yeah. And just for everybody to know, we'll put all the links in the show notes so that they can find you, find your books, find the Academy, everything. And man, I tell you, this has been amazing. I so appreciate your time today. I appreciate all that you're doing for that community, but also just the passion you have about it, helping people, and really just being a true servant, leader by giving back. And so thank you for being here. If Colin's story sparks something in you today, guys, and do us a favor, share this episode with someone navigating their own season of change, because all of us are in a different season, and you never know when that change is going to give you the itch that you need to make. And so the resources are there. And so be sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube so you don't miss what's coming next. Keep showing up, keep doing the work, and keep making progress. And Colin, thanks again. I'm Jody Donaldson, and I'll see you next time in the Progress Zone.
Thanks for joining me in the Progress Zone. If today's episode gave you a spark, share it with a friend, subscribe, or leave a quick review. And remember, progress isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. I'm Jody Donaldson, and I'll catch you next time inside the Progress Zone.